Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to this is the inaugural episode of Texts and Plugs and Rock and Roll, and I'm super stoked to have a guest on today, William Ong. William, first of all, why don't you tell everybody how we know each other and a little bit about your technical background? Because that's the beginning, right? We start off with the technical part and then we move into the music stuff later. So cool.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So yeah, we actually met on Twitter. So recently, like 2 months ago, I was working at a stealth startup, and we had this thing where they were like, "Oh, we need to boost our Twitter and get it running." So I had previously run TikTok accounts, so I just ported over the algorithm I was using for TikTok and tried to revamp it for Twitter, and we were testing that. And as we were testing the new algorithm for Twitter to boost, met Adam along the way.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I reached out, and yeah, I'm also a musician, but I also like doing developer work. So definitely cool stuff. I guess a little bit about my technical background. I'm kind of all over the place. So I actually did music stuff before I did tech stuff. So what I did originally was I was a salesman. I was a sales guy, and I would do door to door knocking with houses. We sold like just a bunch of random things with the family, and one of those things we ended up doing was with our TikTok, we started doing music and doing all that stuff to make our sales pitches more beautiful, I guess, and make things sound slightly better. And as we were doing that, I got more into music, learned saxophone, learned piano, and all that. And eventually, I got to the point where I was playing with my saxophone and guitar pedals. And
Oh,
so,
nice.
so yeah, once we did guitar pedals, then that's circuits, that's DSP, that's electronics. I got really interested in that, ended up becoming an electrical engineer, and from there it was a really weird transition because I'd never really done STEM in my life, and then I went into electrical engineering out of the blue nowhere. Somehow magically did okay, and
Yeah.
while I was in engineering, I did data science, and through data science, I got a few internships at a few various companies, and I built out this data science portfolio. Eventually, built out my data science portfolio, started doing data science projects, even won a few hackathons in these companies, and and that brought me to, well, hey, I can build an award-winning AI. How do I go productionalize it? How do I make it actually a product? And that's the journey I'm on now, where it's like, okay, let me learn the front end, let me learn React, let me get really good at all these web frameworks and all that, so I can actually take what I already know works and then make it a product for people to use. So it's been an interesting journey, but
Very cool. Sounds like you answered every single one of my questions in the last 3 minutes. So that's it. That's the pod.
cool.
Just kidding. So yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to mentally figure out what you just told me. So you actually started off door-to-door sales, moved into electrical engineering,
Yeah.
interesting, and then eventually moved into data science and went that circuitous route into doing development. So would you consider yourself a software developer or a data scientist now?
Now probably more software developer because now most of the days I'm in YAML files. I'm doing mainly front end stuff. I have like I now ported over a lot of my Python to Node.js, so it's straight up just it's more developer work now. Uh, and now with data science, like everything's on Hugging Face. You have like I can build an amazing model. Someone else got an open source one that I don't have to pay for. It works 80%. Let me just fine tune it for like 5 minutes and then on my
Right,
way.
exactly.
So.
Exactly. And I'm doing some work with models myself, a little bit at Red Hat, but it's more of it's more of we do the underlying platform that hosts all like the model serving and iterative testing and stuff. We do some work for IBM because IBM owns my company now. In fact, I've just been doing some work today with a customer about doing some stuff with Ansible and connecting it in with Watson X. So that's going to be super fun stuff that I get to work on. But for you, how do you see your tech expertise intersect with your passion for music? Are there specific technologies that you've developed along the way that you said, "Oh, maybe I can use this for a musical project"? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, so my AI experience and my
Mhm.
development experience mainly
Mhm.
focused on computer vision systems.
Okay.
So as I was building these computer vision algorithms and all that, eventually there was this one hackathon where I did it when I was at Procter and Gamble. There was a hackathon where they were basically saying, I can't go into crazy detail because I signed like 15 million
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
NDAs.
yeah. Of course.
Basically, it was an audio classification project, and you had to classify this specific sound for a research project.
Mhm.
And then you had to see, hey, is this sound uh, water running or is this sound water not running? Something like that. And so I ended up building an algorithm that used Mel spectrograms, which is something I learned in DSP and in music. So
Mhm.
when I do my research with music and like trying to understand music trends, I often go into the Fourier series, Fourier transform to
Mhm.
get visualizations because I'm trying to trend line like pop songs. So I need
Mhm.
some form of metric for a computer to understand. So Mel spectrogram, and
Yeah,
that spectrogram combined with an image classification algorithm like VGG19 ended up hitting 98% F1 score. So like it ended up scoring like near human levels of accuracy
that's
when I
awesome.
really fine tuned it. And so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. I know when I did a project, this is maybe like 2 years ago, doing a predictive um, algorithm for ML ops. So essentially, like being able to determine if some sort of value that you got over the course of a time series was an anomaly or not. So, like an anomaly detection algorithm. And it turned out that Fourier series actually worked really well for that too. And it was something I wasn't expecting at all. We used a little bit of Facebook's profit model at that time, but we also did some Fourier analysis in it, and that really helps you determine like whether or not the thing that you're looking at is within the realm of normal or not. And that was really fun to
Yeah.
get to go. Oh yeah, I remember Fourier series. I remember that from math class, and I remember that from sound analysis. Right. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how those things overlap a little bit. Would you say that there are any projects that you did in your past that in the electrical engineering space that you would like to see move into more of a, I guess, digital realm, or do you think that you find doing the DSP stuff sort of as hardware as a separate passion really is the way to go?
Well, what I actually see is it going backwards, going the other direction.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing that I think a lot of digital things that we're doing should
Hmm.
become analog because so like for example, like there's with the Fourier series and Fourier transforms and all that, those can all be modeled with analog circuits at
Hmm.
essentially infinitely high resolution. Like
Yeah.
quantum computers are basically going to be run mostly from what I've seen so far
Mhm.
on analog chips, analog ICs and stuff like that. Stuff where there's no zero, no one. It's like a continuous curve. So like I'm really starting to see that we're actually moving the other way. And in addition, like I'm seeing this in multiple industries. So in music, you're seeing people using analog pedals instead of FPGAs. You're seeing in film, so with cameras, I do photography for fun sometimes. We're going from digital back to film, and we're moving backwards, trying to get more organic. As AI is like becoming this big giant behemoth, people are starting to feel like this need to like get back to their roots. Like my brother
Right.
in his
Yeah.
digital art class
Yeah.
was told to go to a forest.
Yeah, I remember I read an article, I want to say it was in like March or April on Wired, that was all about how they were sort of the zombie, they called it, I think, the unbelievable zombie comeback of analog computing. And it was all about how these analog chips, because they're using less power than a traditional digital, because you have to constantly have power source against a digital circuit in order to be able to keep stuff in the memory, right? To be able to keep the latch. And so being able to have something be stored as like an analog value of some sort, and it could even be like flash memory or something, but having
Yeah,
it stored in that like compute, a sort of like compute in memory uh, storage means that you can save a lot on the power requirements, being able to keep all the data there. So it's really interesting that we are starting to see that. I think some of it too is the fact that AI is so ubiquitous and people are just sort of looking to adopt it really quickly means that the only way to fight back against a computer is to do things that a computer can't do, or rather the only way to fight back against a discrete set of values taking work from you is to figure out problems that a discrete set of values can't solve.
yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. It's super interesting.
Yeah, it's getting fun out there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about the other way around? Like, can you share maybe a memorable or challenging experience where your technical skills ended up being crucial in something that you were working on musically, like where the way that you thought about a problem in tech sort of led to the way that you think about a problem when you're doing something with music?
Yeah, so here's one right now that I'm tackling currently, and it's been helpful. So I did mainly data science for a while, and so from there I'm doing a lot of trend analysis. I'm doing a lot of outlier analysis and all that, and I'm taking essentially just boatloads of manufacturing data to like come up with, hey, what does well in a manufacturing line, what works well like that, like so in process metrics and in process data, lots of time series, lots of just influx db, the whole nine yard. And so from what I've been doing there, now in music, my dad was like, "Hey, I want to be a pop star. You were my data scientist in TikTok. Let's hammer through. Let's become pop stars or something for in like Asia or something." So now I'm basically just running like at this point like 10, 20 social media accounts, all essentially like they're a manufacturing line, and I'm basically pulling telemetry data as I would from production lines, and I'm using what I know from manufacturing and reliability engineering to just be
Sure.
like, okay, if I understand this trend and I know what time this is happening, let me go plug it into GPT. Let me go plug it into wherever. Let me go generate music or generate a trend that I'm going to post. So like,
Fascinating. That's
so
cool.
yeah, it's some
So
fun stuff.
is your dad a data scientist too, or no?
So my dad's a sales guy. So I didn't.
Okay.
So my dad and I have worked together for like at this point a decade and a half. I
Mhm.
started when I was like 10 years old, knocking on doors with my dad.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay.
So like my dad's always done sales, always done the content side, and I was kind of his like
Mhm.
analyst in the background, just doing math and things that everyone else in the family's like, this is boring.
Right.
I'll
That
go
makes
do
sense.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you've done like all this different stuff, right? How on earth do you keep up with the latest developments in technology or in music or in really anything? Like what's your information diet look like, and how do you decide what to consume or not consume, or what to test and not test?
Yeah, so I figure this out in a very strange way, is what I've been told, because it's like, oh, you're a data scientist, right? Just pull in ridiculous amounts of feeds of data and just crunch and then summarization algorithm, hit go, boom, do that. I actually do it in probably the most analog way imaginable. I go to parks, I go to museums, I go just walk around places and just listen, and then eventually you just hear some keywords, and then you pretty quickly understand what the trend is. Like when I was at Trader Joe's, I hear people talking about Bitcoin. I'm like, you know what? Bitcoin's probably popular right now if
Hmm.
at Trader Joe's and it's Bitcoin. So I just kind of keep my eyes open, and I'm on social media every day. So like usually I'll be able to find the trends, but the way I get novel ideas is by just existing and
Yeah.
doing very non-tech things.
Cool. Yeah, and you're significantly younger than me, so I'm assuming that you probably are more of a social media native than I am. Like I actually took, I don't know, a ton of time off of social media and tried to stay away from it as long as I could until I got my most recent promotion. And then ironically enough, during my
Congrats.
most recent promotion process, they're like, "Oh yeah, you don't have much of an online presence, do you? That's something you should work on." And I'm like, well, the whole point of not doing that was that I would be able to focus on all these other things that would lead me to be successful, right? But then I realized like that's not an option anymore. Like we have to be social beings whether we like it or not, especially in sales. Like and that's one thing we have in common is both of us are now in the public eye trying to offer things for sale or offer technical expertise or whatever, and we have to be public figures now. So it's just kind of how it works. For me, I think my diet isn't really so much from figuring out trends on social media, but I do the analog thing too. Like I love to go to, just out to the park and just kind of be by myself for a while. But then when people walk by, kind of listen in on what that conversation's like, or grocery stores. Like one thing that I've done recently, and I know this is going to sound like the most insane thing ever, but I've actually been doing Instacarting every once in a while. Like if I need something at the grocery store, rather than going and doing like going to the grocery store myself, I'll actually go and do an Instacart run to get the thing I want and then have somebody else pay for my grocery store trip. But what it does is it forces me while they're, cranking through 50 items or whatever in this Instacart run to talk to the cashier and find out like what what's the pulse of the area, what kinds of things are going on. And I go shop sometimes in stores I wouldn't normally shop in, or go expose myself to public areas I wouldn't normally go to. And so that way, getting to see the way other people live in an environment, getting to see and interact in stores I wouldn't normally go in, see what's on sale, like it just hearing conversations I wouldn't normally hear, it gets me outside of my bubble, and then I'm starting to think about things a little more critically and a little more holistically. So yeah, so it's not something I'm doing like because I need the money as much as it is just it's just nice to have extra $50 or whatever in a day, but really it's more of the like kind of forcing myself out of my comfort zone and thinking about things differently and critically.
Oh,
So
that's like really smart, actually.
yeah,
I need to try that. Yeah.
yeah, and I've got like a little Subaru, the just a little tiny runaround car. My wife gets the nice car, so
Yeah.
you take the little Subaru and just go running around, and it's fun. It's kind of fun.
I have a Subaru also. Nice
Yeah,
legacy from like 2016.
yeah, yeah. Mine's a 14, but yeah, I mean those little cars they get around, right? And they're not terribly difficult to fix. There is the problem with the engine that they occasionally will blow a head gasket and it's super expensive to fix. But once you do that,
Yeah.
rock solid, rock solid.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice reliable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So can you think of like as far as your musical background goes, what instruments do you play other than saxophone, or are there others, or is it just that's it?
Yeah, so I mainly play saxophone, but I started playing piano at like age 5 and all
Hmm.
at that time. And
Yeah.
so what I did there was like I just kind of my mom put me in lessons because she's like, hey, this is like so I guess a bit of background here. The reason why I play instruments is so that I can make my brain better, so I can code better. It's
Mm.
like I don't really play music to play music. I play music so that my connections between the hemispheres are better is what I
Interesting. So
hope
it's
to
like a
have.
synaptic building tool, really,
Yeah,
in a way. Okay. Cool.
yeah,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
yeah, but
And
oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask, like, given that you look at it more as a synaptic growth tool, do you tend to like music that's more analytical? Like, or do you listen to like progressive rock and free jazz and stuff that's sort of like out there and out there just to build your brain faster, or do you enjoy genres that are a little more mainstream?
Yeah, so I'm a weird mix. So it's kind of 80-20. Mostly it's the mainstream genres because we're
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to get into this industry anyways, so I need to
Yeah.
understand what the mainstream looks like. But I do pop up the occasional Japanese math rock and then like just these like
Nice, nice.
completely like let's drop E and then have some fun and see
Hmm.
what happens, and that type of genre I do like as well, and I kind of I kind of really like seeing like how some of these artists, what they'll do is they'll do something called the Tartini tone. So they'll play a tone and then a tone a fifth above, and it
Hmm.
sounds like an octave below. So like you
Yeah.
have like really terrible speakers, it'll still sound bassy because of like
Oh,
fifth.
interesting.
So
Awesome.
it's like yeah, I'm really interested in learning about the math behind it and learning about how people produce. So now I'm getting into the MPC and all that,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's mostly mainstream, but I just listen to whatever most of the
Cool.
time.
Yeah, I think is it Leo P, the guy that plays for Too Many Zoos? I think he does the Tartini tones, where he's got like a very sax, and he'll just crank out the lowest note you've possibly ever heard of, just to get people's attention. Are you
Yeah,
familiar with? Do you know who I'm talking about? Too Many Zoos.
too
So
many.
they are. It's a trumpet. It's a sax player, a trumpet guy, and a guy that plays bass drum and a bunch of percussion. And they're a street band. So they will go like out to the subway system in New York City and just like play in the streets. And they have a song called Car Alarm where they actually went up on the roof of a building that has one of those like drive up, like parking garage on the roof. And they got a Toyota Tacoma truck and got all these guys in the back of the truck and then did a song around the car alarm. So the bass drum guy would like bang his foot super hard on the bed of the truck and then make the alarm go off, and then they'd play along with it. And then in the middle of the song, the alarm goes off and they're like, oh crap. And then they have to go and bang it again and then like finish the song. So they do like really creative
Yeah,
work around the street environment and this like urban environment and being out in public. So that's kind of their shtick. They're basically like one of those little subway groups that goes around. But they're very, very famous now because of all these videos and because of all this interactivity. And Leo is just a phenomenal sax player. Like he's just a beast. He's in some other bands too, like Lucky Chops and stuff. But as far as street performers, he's probably one of the more popular ones.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah. Except for maybe the Unipiper, who's local to me. He's the guy that is a software developer as well. He's somebody that I'm going to try to get on the show as well
Oh,
eventually. But Brian's a pretty busy guy. But he is a software developer who dresses up as Darth Vader and rides a unicycle and does bagpipes. And he's also like one of those internet famous guys. So
oh, that's so
yeah,
funny.
yeah, he's great. He's great.
Yeah, I need to now look up some other people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's part of the idea of doing
Yeah,
this, right? It's I want the audience to be able to learn about some new bands or learn about some new experience. Just learn about what other people do and how they balance out this passion between doing and performing music and having this part of their life, but then also like we have a day job, right? And it's
yeah,
very very different. How do you balance that out? I mean, do you have a specific like practice schedule or a way that you do time management where you focus, you know, stuff on musical endeavors and then you do your other work? I mean, I know for you it's probably different than it is for me because you are self-employed, right?
yeah.
So you have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule. But how do you tackle that? How do you go about planning your day?
Yeah, so I am a weirdly late night owl, so I do
Mhm.
my best work at like 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. So the problem is I'm not doing music at that late of a time because I have neighbors. So
Sure, sure.
we actually built like this anechoic chamber that's soundproofed so that we can practice at any time of the day. And
Nice,
we
nice.
figured out how to do it for like $700, so we were very happy about that.
Sweet. Is
Uh,
that something you did in your garage?
yeah, we just built it ourselves. But
Cool.
uh,
Nice.
but yeah, so we do that. So I tend to like practicing anywhere between like around 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Mhm.
But yeah, since my like I am self-employed, I'm kind of basically a social media consultant who can code. So
Mhm.
I do all this type of stuff. So what happens is if there's a client that day, I just shift my music around because I'll just
Cool,
practice
cool.
some other time. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or if I'm doing an electrical engineering
Mhm.
project, I tend to have it music related anyways. So it's
Mhm.
like if I'm going to build this circuit, I want it to do amplifier things. I want to do silly things like that. So
Yeah,
it's
nice.
always a mix, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't exactly follow the craziest schedule. It's basically just
Mhm.
whenever I have time I work, and whenever I don't have time and some downtime, I just play music or do social media or like right now when we're trying to boost Twitter and we're on
Mhm.
Twitter just trying to figure out how to do it. So
Very cool. Very cool. And are you doing when you're doing like your electrical engineering stuff? Are you doing anything that is like embedded systems related, or is it all pretty much analog? Like,
So it's mainly hybrid. So I do a
oh,
lot with FPGAs, so that's very very
oh,
digital.
okay, cool.
I do FPGAs, and then I also just do like standard C programming because it's easy. So when I
Mhm.
joke about like, hey, C is a high level language for me, it's because
Mhm.
I'm doing shifts all day. I'm doing binary
Right, right.
encoding, and it's ugh.
Yeah, I have some computer engineering background. I actually so my first degree is in music, is in
Oh
music composition, and in order to be able to afford to pay for said music degree, because guess what, music degree isn't exactly going to be bringing you home 200 grand a year. I
yeah
went back to
no.
school for computer engineering, so I actually went to Portland State, like right down the street,
Oh
for
cool
computer engineering. So I was doing things exactly like that, like taking a RAM chip and moving the wires around to try to write individual registers. And along the way, I got an internship at Intel. And basically, I thought I was going to be like an embedded systems engineer for the rest of my life, building robots. That was my plan. And I discovered that one, embedded system engineers don't get paid anywhere near as much as software developers do.
no
And I needed to pay for a degree. And the second thing I discovered was that I could get one of these little. This is a sweet potato. This is the Libra computer. It's like a I don't even remember who makes the chip. I think it's Anlogic. So it's
oh
a like an Anlogic ARM chip on here. This thing is like $30, and I can
yeah
do this anytime I want. Right? Like I can just hook this up to a monitor and keyboard and whatever anytime I want. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be making any value for anybody, right? Like I can just play around with this and get that satisfaction myself. So I
yeah
ended up going to switching my program to Oregon State and doing computer science instead, and it was a good choice. I mean, because I work for Red Hat now, so
yeah
that's fun, right? And
yeah
that's it's been successful. You know, I have my moments with working for a company that's owned by IBM. that's not always the best. And I know that at some point in time, I probably will go out on my own. Just
Yeah,
I'm just wired that way. But for now, like while my kids are young and I've got great health care, and there are a lot of good reasons to be in a corporate job and not just simply just go on your own. And I don't, like my parents live across the country. I don't really have that much of a support structure out here. So for me, it's a good mix for now. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a I guess kind of the opposite situation
Hmm.
where I I live with my family because Asians, like
Hmm.
we all tend to live in the same unit, and so like a lot of the chores and stuff like that we kind of split, so it takes
Yeah.
time away. And I did work the corporate job, and oh my goodness, is it nice to have a stable salary. But
Hmm.
I've done sales for so long, where it's just like I kind of like hustling and hunting for things. I kind of like coming up with new interesting projects and ideas that people want to try
Hmm.
to buy, and
Yeah,
but
and growing up for me, my dad always had the stable job because he was an electrical engineer, and then my mom had a kitchen store for a long time, so we had that mixture of we had
yeah,
an entrepreneurial thing to go do and stuff to go work on in the family business, but at the same time, then also this stable income. So it was a nice mix of both. And my wife works in insurance, but the kids are young right now, so she's not working. So it's good for me to have a stable income. And then when I want to go do other more entrepreneurial adventures, I go do that at night after the kids go to bed, basically,
yeah.
or on the weekends after. Yeah, basically after the kids go to bed. So
Oh,
do you,
that's
so here's an interesting question for you. Do you see any parallels between the way that you approach code and the way that you would write or work with music? Like, do you find that there are similarities in the way that those creative processes work? And if so, um, which one do you find influences the other one more?
yeah. So okay, this is cool. So the way I the way I code is basically heavily off of. I'm a functional programmer mainly. I didn't do much object oriented stuff. So
Okay.
everything I do is like a cascade of functions, which just so happens to be pretty much identical to how you create tracks on an MPC. You
Hmm.
create one thing and then you loop it, and you create another
Yep.
thing, loop it, blah 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 blah. Do that 18 times, boom, you have a track. That's
Yeah.
like pretty much identical to how I code with like
Hmm.
Python, where it's like I have data, let me go pipe it through 15 filters, boom. And that's same thing with guitar pedals. Like, let me go pipe it through 16 effects instead of using a transfer function or instead of electricity
Hmm.
getting moved. It's just data getting shoved through. So it's I think my music influences my programming a lot more the other way around, because if I were to do say object oriented programming, then maybe I might get into modules and modular arrays and all that and loop
Hmm.
all that. But I just haven't taken that dive. I think like standard DAWs do well enough for most of what I do,
Hmm.
especially pop music. Like, let me just go and like analyze it in Python and pipe it into a DAW and have fun. But yeah,
Right.
I think music is a lot more
Cool.
for
And I'm assuming when you say MPC, you mean like one of those Akai units that looks like a giant remote control that, you know,
yeah,
okay, sampler. Got it. Okay.
yeah.
Making sure I understood. Yeah, it's really
Okay.
interesting. Like I've always been really into electronic music, just in general. Like a lot of my influences growing up were like classic rock, but then I also listened to like The Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and uh, Lemon Jelly and like a lot of this like what the British would call electro, I guess. So I listened to a lot of that kind of stuff and Daft Punk and a lot of that scene. So I was always really fascinated with that stuff. But then when it came time for me to work on music, it was always analog instruments around. So like I've got a acoustic guitar that's over here in the corner, and I've got an auto harp and like all these just acoustic instruments that were the things that were around because my family grew up in I grew up in Appalachia, so we didn't always have electricity around. I mean, I
Yeah.
did, but like a lot of my family's members didn't necessarily. So yeah, for me, it was always like this very tactile um, thing, and I really struggled with trying to figure out how to get that stuff to translate to recording things on a computer. And when I would create music, it was always very distinctly separate worlds. It was like this is the thing where I'm working on such and such track on GarageBand, but anything that's analog, like recording it, didn't always work. Nowadays, now that I've got my little Blue Yeti mic, it's a little bit easier to do that. But I always grew up with this very distinct separate, sort of two separate musical identities. One of which was the like sampler led, tracker based, digital way of thinking about things, and that I guess you could think about it as like the functional programming of music. But then
Yeah.
also the more object oriented, the physical instruments and playing in bands and stuff like that. So yeah, it is interesting how the way that you approach a specific problem can affect how you translate that world into the way that you play or the way you put stuff together.
Yeah, it's super fun. Super
Oh
fast.
yeah, it's way fun, way fun. Are there any upcoming tech trends that you can think of that, or advancements that you foresee that might have do you think is going to have a significant impact on the way that we do music and technology? Before you say generative AI, because I know that's everyone's answer, um, uh, my thought is on this question is more like on the way that you perform or the way that you interact with music rather than the way that it gets produced in the end. Because a lot of generative AI, I think it's like you don't even touch the thing and then it goes and makes something. I'm
Yeah,
thinking of this question more in like you are physically interacting with the music and creating a result you want.
yeah. So I've used generative AI since like 2019. Like I was one of the original researchers who had the beta access to like
Mm-hmm.
GPT. And so it's like the more I look at GPT, the more it just feels like a black box that I can't touch. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I end up building my own tunable algorithms for rap music, for creating lyrics and all that. I'm just doing all that myself. And what you realize really quickly is it just sounds boring. It sounds like everyone else did it. So what I end up doing is like I'm not like essentially like I would put in I sent my whatever AI model and threw
Yeah.
it into a like my social media uh, anomaly detection system, and then whenever there's an anomaly, that's what I pick because I'm like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
it's come up with chaos. Let's see if this works.
Yeah, I
But
think
yeah,
that's a way better approach because AI, or really, I guess, large language models and generative stuff, by its definition, is all about trying to find things that are like everything else because
yes,
that's what the model is, right? You are classifying things. You are taking objects and finding the commonalities, and
yeah,
sometimes that's good, and sometimes in order to be creative, you have to like throw away the commonalities and then keep whatever's left. Right.
yeah.
So I think that's a really creative way to use AI as sort
I
of like
like
the anti AI approach, right? Like
yeah,
find the anomalies and then go work with that and see where it comes from.
yeah. I find them a lot more chaotic, and I guess for just kind of a trend that's gonna
Mhm.
happen probably is you're probably gonna see a lot of your analog synths and analog things that back then would not be able to be replicated digitally. You'll
Mhm.
probably see those coming out, and then what's it called, stemming? I think stemming is gonna be a big thing where like back then if you wanted to like take a sample a track and then
Mhm.
stem out the voice, stem out the bass hits, stem out all these different
Mhm.
things. When you're sampling, I think there's like even MPC came out with their own stem software just recently. I
Mhm.
think all these companies are going to pop out with them out of the woodwork. And I think there's going to be open source projects that do that, where it's like, hey, as a producer, if I want to make whatever music track
Mhm.
and I want to sample, say, I don't know, Creative Commons music or sample
Mhm.
music that's super old that I wouldn't want to go through and do the tuning and nonsense myself with an AI.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Yeah.
easier to use these old tracks that are free to use. So I think
Right.
that's probably one of the things that's going to help our workflow quite a bit. So
Well, and the precedent's already been set with that new Beatles track, right? Because Peter Jackson had some stemming software that he offered to the Beatles in order for them to be able to create. I don't even remember the name of the song, but yeah, then they could isolate the Peter Jackson, or I'm sorry, not Peter Jackson, John Lennon's vocals out of his existing demo track, and then be able to incorporate that with some of the other recordings from Harrison and the others that are still alive, right? So I
yeah,
think that now that there has been, and that's usually the way that I see this work, is that as soon as some really popular track includes something that's a trend, I mean, look at Share with Believe, right? Like as soon as there were other tracks that had used the Antares software before. And
yeah,
for those of you in the audience who may not be aware of what we're talking about Autotune here. So Autotune was originally an algorithm that was created by Antares in deep sea oil exploration. So it was a way to be able to match waveforms in order to be able to create bands of tracks where they could throw the drill down and essentially be able to meet specific levels and determine whether there was oil there or not. That's what that software was for. And then
So
somebody
cool.
said, well, we can tweak those bands of things and make them into musical note bands, right? So that wherever the input comes in, we can bucket that into different bands and make it music notes and do the same thing. And they came out with this software and called it Auto Tune. And somebody decided it would be a really great idea to throw this on Cher's voice and do so intentionally with her eliding her voice up and down, and created a big pop hit out of it. So then that suddenly opened the doors for Auto Tune to come in. And a lot of people really hate that software because it also enables people that can't hit their pitches to be able to sing. And and there's some debate there as to whether or not it's a great tool to use for music production. But as somebody who's had their voice auto-tuned on a track before, I can tell you it's awesome. It's
Yeah,
actually a lot of fun to use, and if you abuse it, it can be fun too. So you really have to say, do I want to use this in a way that's tasteful, or do I want to make it something that's just trashy? And you have to make that decision yourself. But I think with stemming, we're going to see that same kind of thing happen. Now that the Beatles track has come out, where they've said, okay, here's us isolating a voice or isolating a piece of the frequency range out of this particular track. Let's go and incorporate this into something else. You're going to see a lot more. You're going to see cover artists that literally will use, a vocal shout out or something else that's covered up with other tracks and create new versions of that same song. You're going to see people that are just going to be doing vocal covers where they will isolate vocals like they would in karaoke, and they'll just sing over the top of it, that kind of thing. You just see tons of that kind of stuff. I think that's where that's going to go. As far as,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, as far as tech that I see is that is emerging, I also see a lot of stuff that's emerging in the analog space like you do, where people are going to start using more like analog computers and maybe use chat gpt or other ai tools for circuit analysis. So I've seen where a lot of people have taken old schematics where maybe it's been a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and the schematic for a guitar pedal or a synth module or whatever suddenly has become lost to the annals of time. Now people are taking those and going, okay, let's perform a circuit analysis on this, see what components might be missing and what values might fit in to make sense. And now they'll be able to replicate some of these older circuits or come up with new designs that come really, really close, that solve the problem of obsolete parts. Like bucket brigade chips, for example, they're almost impossible to get a hold of nowadays, and there's tons of old gear
yeah,
that use them. People are trying to send this stuff out to AI and say, how can we find another component with tolerances that are close enough that we can go and replace that and maybe replace some other components and have a circuit that's basically like exactly the same sound and characteristics. So I think we're going to see a lot of that too, where that AI technology is going to start to be used essentially in a preservation kind
yeah.
of
I guess
capacity.
have you heard of Flux.ai?
I have, yeah,
They're
yeah. I've heard of
so
Flux.
like I've been using their Copilot. I was like following them when they were like just in their seed round, and they
Hmm.
like yeah, their Copilot's insane. Like now they have like a DSP helper. They have like all these cool things, and I've just been playing with the free version. It's excellent. So it's like KiCad with a brain. It's nice.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
UI
super
clarity.
cool.
Yeah, like and I also see the same thing with amplifier technology too. Like, cause I'm holding on to like my old '70s amps and all that, my tubes,
Mhm,
and I'm holding and like even like my digital Class D amp, the TriPath, like those chips don't exist anymore, and it's like, and I'm kind of stockpiling TriPath chips just because I like the sound of them,
mhm,
and no one makes them, so it's like as we're getting more and more digital, yeah, I think there's going to be a resurgence of these designs coming out again, and it's like, and back then there was like I think with compute, like with what's it called, with IC design, you have like these input output standards
mhm,
that like all the chip manufacturers use to keep their IP. I think AI will probably like for the simpler ICs maybe create I guess internal FPGA logic that works close enough, which that I think will be cool, like open source ICs, that, well, of course, that'll require you to have a forge or something, a foundry that will pay for your chips, but it would be really cool to see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not cheap to get ASICs made, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, we've seen that with Bitcoin, right? Like lots of these companies were crowdsourcing, but we'll see. I think we'll see more of that, like people going and doing the fabless model. We're already seeing that in the semiconductor space. I think we'll see that more in smaller chips as it becomes more of a thing. I'm fortunate that I live in an area that actually has a lot of PCB manufacturers. Like, there is one literally like 5 minutes down the road.
Oh,
Um,
where are you
in
situated?
Oregon. So because this area just historically has always been very strong in embedded circuits and in PCBs and stuff, partly because of Intel's influence, but a lot of it honestly is because of Tektronix. So
Yeah.
Tektronix was founded in the same town I live in Beaverton, just like Nike.
Oh.
And yeah, and so because of Tektronix and Esri and all these electronic component manufacturers that are here, there's let's see, onsemi is here, Matrix is here. There are a lot of companies that build components here, and so as a result, we actually have a number of local PCB manufacturers. So some of them are folks that you go and send it off to China and they bring it back, and some of them they're actually literally stamping boards here in Oregon. So I'm really fortunate that I've gotten to kind of learn a little bit about that ecosystem and learn how expensive it is to get,
What?
your Gerber file made into whatever that you want. I actually did embedded systems for a little while at Intel, where we built a little board about this size, maybe a little bit smaller, with an x86 chip in it, and that was a really fun experience. Not something I necessarily would want to do again, just because of the kind of team I was on, and it was very stressful, but. It was cool. I mean, it was like an internal startup, so I had that like entrepreneurial spirit, but inside of a corporate job, and that was really cool. Um,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy that concept of being able to throw together a board and understand the analog issues that happen with a digital board, like things like noise.
Also,
Having lines that are parallel and suddenly you're getting noise because you forgot. Oh yeah, maybe those traces shouldn't be like right next to each other.
maybe
That kind of thing.
right angles.
Yeah, and like trying to like visually look at a board and figure out where the traces are. It can be tough.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff has always been super fun for me. I have a family right now, so I like that time is very precious when they're really young. So some things have to go by the wayside, and then that's unfortunately one of them, where all of my parts are downstairs in the garage waiting for the day when the kids go to school, and I can just like take a day off and go,
Yeah.
like re-solder up a board and go have some fun.
You have
So
a science fair project for them when they come of age.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I did a science fair project that was like a analog motor, that kind of thing. So build a motor. So I think they'll be able to do some fun stuff like that. It'll be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of sharing music, do you have tracks that you work on now? Like, do you have a SoundCloud account, or how do you go and get your music out in the world? Like, how do we find you?
Yeah, so I actually haven't published anything yet so far. It's all
Okay.
just a hobby of mine, but because my dad's like now, hey, I want to become a pop star, so we're gonna in the next few months we're gonna start releasing. We will have a SoundCloud, we'll have a Spotify, and we'll have our TikTok music. So our TikTok is big enough where we can just be eligible. So
Oh, nice.
so
Okay.
our so we can just get eligible as artists pretty quickly. So we're gonna like everything I've learned so far with Twitter and TikTok and all that. We're gonna pipe into music. Uh, yeah, more to come, but yeah, it's always just been a hobby of mine, but now we're starting to see, hey, we can try to make a career out of this. I
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. And I think that a lot of musicians in general, that's one thing that they struggle with. I know I always did, was trying to figure out the best way to get your name known without quote selling out. Although selling out isn't real. Like, I don't
yeah
know. I've always felt that way. Like, selling out is just means that you're good at marketing and you're not afraid and you're not ashamed of it. That's
yeah
just how I look at it. But I've always, being that I played in a lot of like rock bands and stuff, I'd always be playing with other musicians who are like, "Oh yeah, we don't want to be a sellout, man." And you're just like, you just want to like complain about the way that you live, but not offer yourself any alternatives, right? And
yeah
that was one of the main things that I struggled with being in bands in my like in college and then in my 20s was like we would go and we'd create some really great music and go play in a bar or play in a contest or whatever, and then all of a sudden okay, now it's time for the next step. They'd be like, oh, I don't want to sell out. I don't want to do blah blah. And I just was kind of sick of that,
Yeah.
like I guess like anti that anti-establishment kind of thing. It's like just go and sell your stuff, go make your money, go be happy. Because now that opportunity barely exists. Well, I would say it doesn't. It barely exists in mainstream music. In the like, let's go for a major label. Let's go. Uh,
Yeah.
get an album made. Like that's not really a thing anymore. But what I see a lot of people doing is essentially the Prince route, but without calling it that. Like just going and creating stuff on their own, going and getting stuff published on CD Baby. That's another company that's here in Oregon, which is awesome.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're out by the airport. So yeah, so like going and doing all that independent music publication stuff, going and doing that thing on your own, like that's something that I see a lot more of, and I'm really happy that our artists are recognizing that. Yeah, maybe we're not going to get the $10 million from a record deal, but we can go and we can make our own with the Thousand True Fans or whatever. Kevin Kelly, is it Kevin Kelly that said the Thousand True Fans thing on in
Yeah.
Wired magazine? Yeah, which
Yeah.
is
It's
interesting because I don't know if you know anything about the background of Kevin Kelly. And for
no.
those of you in the audience who may not know who he is, he's the guy that founded Wired magazine.
Oh.
But Kevin Kelly also was part of the Whole Earth catalog. So back in like the 70s, maybe into the 80s, there was this thing called the Whole Earth catalog,
Huh. I don't know what
and
this.
essentially it was like a counterculture magazine. It was produced by Stuart Brand, but Kevin Kelly was a part of this, if I recall. And basically, the Whole Earth catalog was like DIY catalogs, journals, magazines, but it was like this techno hippie thing. So it was very influential on guys like Steve Jobs and some of these other sort of counterculture people that wanted to get into technology. So it's really fascinating. I've gotten a couple of old Whole Earth catalog issues at the library and gone and looked through them. But I find that like looking at stuff from the past is a really great way of coming up with new ideas for the future, especially in
Yeah.
this very modern, like postmodern, postmodern. I don't even know what you want to call the post-COVID decade right now, but everything is just kind
It's
of like
something.
all over the place. And yeah, and Stewart, and I think, yeah, my understanding is that Stewart had Kevin Kelly write some of the articles and stuff for a Whole Earth catalog back in the day, and then he was inspired by the technology side of it to go and start Wired.
Oh,
So
that.
it's yeah.
Yeah. What's really cool about music now is like if you have a social media following and you know how to write comedy,
Mhm,
I have an AI that helps me do that, so I
mhm,
don't have to be super creative. Uh, and you have like the patience to just
mhm,
learn how to do electronic music and get it out there, and you can just essentially use Creative Commons music and then create
mhm,
melodies off of those so they hold up in court. And then if you do those three things, it's like, well, you have a pretty high chance of hitting like I guess pop stardom relatively. Like you don't have to go like crazy super fame,
mhm,
but just enough to like sustain yourself is fun. And now there's like even record labels that kind of tailor to that. Like for a lot of Asian artists, there's 88 Rising. There's these other ones as well, but like different smaller labels are starting to pop out of the woodwork, being like, hey, if you have a social media following already and you're semi
mhm.
decent with music, like, hey, we'll promote you and we'll do that type of stuff. Just send us your tracks. If they're good, like we might do a deal with you. Like it's like a lot of these new labels to compete are starting to open up their doors a little bit, and I'm all for that. That sounds awesome to me. So
Yeah. Well, and especially with the power of the internet, specifically, it's global now. So Asian artists can have fans that are like a guy like me in the US, right?
yeah,
Like and or folks that are popular in Europe or folks that are popular in Africa or popular in South America. Suddenly they have access to niche audiences that are in other parts of the globe. And even if they
yeah,
never perform a show there or they never go visit there, they still have a fan base that exists there because the fan base is really the internet. It's not really like a physical location, right? So I think
yeah,
that's one of the cool things about social media in particular with musicians is that suddenly you now have the ability uh, to spread out your message further than whatever your local geographic area would have been in the past, right?
Yeah, and you have like some artists, like I think Frank Ocean, who like really hates performing live. You have some of these the artists that just absolutely despise performing live. Like now they can make a career, like a very successful career, just doing stuff online. They're like, I don't have to be in front of you. Just let me make my music, please. Like so, people that,
Yeah, and then there are others that are like that retract from social media because they just can't handle the pressure. Like
yeah,
Charlie XCX, deleted her uh, Twitter, and Billie Eilish deleted her Twitter at one point. So you've got like all these people that are pop stars in the sort of traditional sense that then they have a backlash against social media because they handle it in a different way, or they don't have a really good grasp on their fans or a grasp on how to handle the stresses of social media. What's really interesting is that almost never happens with older generations. It's always younger artists, the
yeah,
people that have grown up with social media all their lives and don't
yeah.
realize that it's like not as integral as they think it is,
Yeah,
or
so
it's more integral to them than it should be.
yeah, for me it was like since I was online for so long, it's like when people are trying to peddle anything that tries to get me angry or something, like they go through a rejects filter first before I ever see it. So like it's like most of those things like I never even notice. And like when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends like because the things I was interested in just aren't what 5-year-olds like or 10-year-olds
Right.
like. Origami, I was into like knitting and like all
Hmm.
these silly things, and so it was like I never really cared about fitting in, and I never
Hmm.
really did. Like frankly, when I was in corporate, like my approach didn't fit in, but my results were very good. like
Yeah, yeah.
I would hit ridiculous quotas that like they were designed to make me fail, and I still hit
Hmm.
them and passed them. Like it wasn't even hard for me to do that because I
Right.
just do stuff backwards, and
Yeah.
sometimes it works. So
Yeah. And on the internet, everyone fits in. You just don't fit in
yeah,
with everyone.
yeah,
That's how it works, right? So
yeah,
yeah, and I find it really interesting that for you, making music is almost more about making assets for social media that it is like the social media is the add-on to the musical experience. And for some people that really works well, and for some that's not a thing at all. Like they just get
yeah.
super annoyed by it. So I think it's interesting that your approach is the opposite, where it's your music is almost an asset to help you with some other goal rather than like the music is the passion and then all these other things are the things that you do in order to feed that passion, right?
Yeah, and I feel like my artistry and my like my creativity comes more in my technical skills. So like my code looks weird. I've been told my code looks different, but it works. And they're like, that's like my code just looks kind of different. But like I think a lot of my creativity comes out in the software side.
Mhm.
So for me, music is much more like, well, let me see how I can integrate that into my software. And it's like, yeah, I'm a bit backwards in that case, but yeah, I think it's a fun mix to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you doing any software generated music at all, like C Sound or any of those, like Super Collider or anything like that?
What I find when I use those libraries is that
Mhm.
it's kind of a black box set of music, and I throw it into a stem software. It just looks like Gaussian noise, and I just end up with a garbage output. So what
Okay.
I do is I kind of just generate melodies, generate lyrics, generate potential beat patterns.
Hmm.
Do like it's very simple what I do, but it's kind of like I'm gonna be launching a lot of these things as background music for my future YouTube videos,
Hmm.
but like as a test run. But yeah, it's I don't use a lot of the generative stuff because from what I heard, it just sounds so generic to the point where people are just like, this kind of sounds like nowadays newer artists like they get popular for doing something completely weird
Hmm.
once and they go
Yeah.
mainstream. Like why am I building stuff that's already mainstream sounding when I'm not when I haven't done the silly thing that's gonna get me there? So it's
Right.
like
Right. That makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense. And
it's
again, that's a very social media way of thinking about the world, right? It's this I need to have an anomaly so that I go viral, so that I break out of whatever the what but then again that's the way music and art kind of used to be in a
yeah,
lot of ways. I mean, in the 1970s you could play a rock song with a flute in it and be played on the radio. And I
yeah,
don't know if that's a thing now. Like Andre 3000 goes and throws a flute on his song and everybody made fun of him for it. So it's a completely different world that we live in now
yeah.
compared to even just 20, 30 years ago.
And now you hear like rap music with flutes in it. It's like, hey, that
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's super fun.
Yep. Cool. Well, William, this has been fun. We're at like, I don't know, 55 minutes. We're just about at the top of the hour.
Yeah,
But I just wanted to say thank you. This has been super fun. And hopefully you will watch the podcast. You can watch yourself if you want. I'm the kind of person that does not like to watch myself. So
me
I will try my hardest to watch this recording. But right now I've got, I think, 9 other artists in the deck that I'll be talking to, other engineers,
cool.
everybody from like I just piddle around on a hobby to you've heard my song on the radio in the '90s.
Oh,
So
that
I've got quite a range of folks, and this recording, along with the other ones, we will start releasing biweekly in March. So
oh
thank you so much for being a guest.
yeah,
Obviously I'll see you again on Twitter sometime very soon, and
yeah.
it's been
See
a
you again.
pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Take care.